Hello and welcome to Angular Air. On today's show, we're talking all about open source software. And to that end, we have some of the best in the business to discuss this topic, starting with Wesley Cho. Say hi, Wesley.
Hello.
Jesus Rodriguez.
Hello.
And our good friend, Dimitri.
Hi, guys.
So we have a lot of topics we want to go over today. We actually had Wesley and Jesus on the show a couple months ago, and I think we were talking about so many things and got so deep into different areas that we decided to have them back and kind of have a round two. So I kind of broken today's show into kind of three sections and three aspects of open source software that I wanted to go over. And of course, we could bring up, as we kind of talk about anything you guys want to discuss as well. But basically breaking it into, the maintainers of open source software and a lot of the stuff that they have to go through and aspects of things from the maintainer side. Then contributors, both people who are potential contributors and current contributors, some of the kind of protocols and best practices there, and some of your thoughts around that. And then finally, sort of company aspect of this, the people who are sponsoring open source projects and kind of sort of helping the ecosystem thrive. So let's start off on the maintainer side. I think everybody on this panel, and myself included, are maintainers of one repository or another. So I think the thing that this is sort of jumping right into the thick of things. One thing I've been thinking about a lot lately is, the fact that all of us have full-time jobs, and we run our projects almost on the side. We're not directly making money off them. So what are your guys' thoughts on how you balance basically your activities on a daily basis between the jobs that we're actually making money and you have responsibilities and obligations towards, and the open source projects that you are maintaining, and because you're maintaining, you obviously have a sense of responsibility for that. Jesus, what are your thoughts on this?
So I am a bit of a cheater because I do open source for work, but what I try to do is get in the weekends or the nights to do all the open source I can. I review my email and see which issues need to be addressed soon. But it's hard because sometimes you don't have too much time for that.
Yeah, what happens when, has there ever been a case, Jesus, where you've had like a super emergency for your project and you just couldn't get to it because you had you were bogged down on stuff at work?
Yeah, sometimes there is something that I need to fix right now. That's like a kind of pressure because you want your users to be happy, but you have your responsibilities. So try to do both, to be honest, because I could make something good for each part. I can make a fix for them and I can do the work, but thankfully that didn't happen that much for me.
Wesley, how do you maintain your balance in your life?
For me, work comes first. As far as open source goes, occasionally I'll do something during work, but most of the time it's on my spare time. So weekends, nights, weeknights, or whatever I can spare a chance.
And actually, Wesley, I forget, do you have a family? Do you have any kids?
Nope, I'm single, so I'm free of that responsibility at least.
Well, yeah, because I was going to say that what you suggest, like kind of nights and weekends, I sort of do as well. But it does get tougher, I think, once you have a family, and then like that eats up some of your time. I agree that it's the same thing with me. That I try to do during the day. Obviously, get so bogged down or you're fully focused on your work stuff. And then your spare time on the weekends or whatever, you try to fix as much as you can.
Although, like some workplaces, you'll have the advantage of where it's not as intense, so that you do have the room to do maybe more open source during work too. It really depends on your situation, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, actually, there's times when the stuff that you're doing at work sort of aligns with the stuff you're contributing. I feel like that's can be rare, like where it totally aligns, but sometimes it is the case. Dimitri, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm tutor too, so I'm working on open source in my work time. So, but I have a strong argument for my guys and for those who pay for me to keep things done, because open source is a part of our product. So I have to invest my time to keep things going and to move on. This is
That's right.
sometimes.
You're doing contracting work, right, Dimitri?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
most
Yeah,
of the time.
and I could totally see in that case, and I see the same thing with like Lucas and people that are doing contract work. The open source kind of totally aligns with it because if nothing else, it's like a marketing channel for you, right?
Yep, completely.
Cool. Did I cut you off? What else were you going to say there? Dimitri?
Oh, forgive me. Actually, this is it. So basically, I don't know, last half of the year, whatever I do is contributing to open source, and there are two kinds of open source for me: is reusable components, another part, and I was so lucky to agree with my customer to open source his products. So whatever I do now is open source, and I'm glad of it, so I can share the things we found with this community. It's kind
Okay.
of my motivation to do it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And I think that what I found is that you don't as you keep going further both with your project and work, you end up having less time, not more, right? Like even though I at first for myself I always thought, oh, okay, once I get over this current stuff at work, then I'll have more time to pursue. But in actuality, you have less, right? So I think one of the solutions, and the other thing I wanted to hear some of your guys' thoughts on is, the solution sort of is getting other people involved, right? Like you aren't going to be able to do everything. So what types of things do you guys do to get other people involved in your open source projects? And maybe this one I'm going to throw Chris, who's the maintainer of UI Router, just joined. Hi, Chris.
Hello, everybody.
So, Chris, did you hear my question? Like, what do you do to get other people involved in the UI Router project?
Yeah, that's an actually interesting topic that's very relevant to me right now. We're actually looking for people to be involved in the UI Router project. So I think one of the things to do is to understand that everybody has a different they have a different perspective on your project. They have different skills that they can bring to the table, and they have different things that they're interested in. So, like some people might just be really interested in doing things like triaging, and so if you take that into a consideration when somebody comes into your project and they start talking about things, you try to figure out how can they possibly fit into your project. An example of that recently. A gentleman named Marco Otto. He tweeted me on Twitter about UI Router for React because I created a little proof of concept for it. And I said, hey, you're interested in UI Router, you're interested in React, like what can we do? And so I just invited him essentially to come in and start hacking on that. And we're now in the process of actually creating that.
That's awesome. One thing on that, Chris. So he comes in, and it's great actually when you have people that are enthusiastic already, and you don't have to like convince them, spend a lot of time convincing them to do something. But then there's the secondary issue of like, a lot of times it's very rare to find someone who just can jump in and just figures it out all on their own. So you have to spend some of your time sort of helping them to learn the project, to get into it, and that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you, I guess, prioritize or just deal with that time management issue of like, I want more contributors, but I don't have any time to help them out. Like, what's your own kind of personal like time management tricks or how you basically approach things?
I think I do as much as I can, but not. I try not to do too much to get somebody involved. So I've had a number of people contact me directly and say, hey, how can I help? And so I have a list of things. We have docs, we have examples that we need written, just the blog post, whatever it might be. So I'll throw that list out there, kind of see if any of the things on the list are something that somebody's interested in. If they do, if they give me good feedback on that, then I'll take the next step and say, okay, well, you're interested in writing blogs. Well, here's, this is kind of hoping to build a blogging platform built into UiRouter's main website. So I'll say, here's what we've got so far. Can you take it the next step? So basically, it has to be a conversation, a back and forth between somebody who's interested in contributing and the main team in order to get them more involved.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you're touching on, but maybe didn't say explicitly, is that you can, I feel like, waste your time or spin your wheels a lot, rather, trying to help everybody along. Like, not that you couldn't and can't, or not that you shouldn't help people as much as you can, but the fact is that there are a lot of people who truly want to be able to help, but then they can't for one reason or another. And so you almost have to have some way of figuring out, whether people truly can contribute and are able to kind of to cross that sort of mental barrier to do that. And I guess it's a tricky thing of how do you gauge whether should you be spending more time to get the people over that kind of mental hurdle, or versus letting them get over it and then help them? You know what I mean? I mean, Wes or Jesus, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, what I prefer to do is if the guy or girl has interest, they will show it. So I try to help them to do stuff. If they create issue, hey, this is broken, so I always ask, do you want to fix it? I can guide you on how to fix it. If that person is really interested and wants to join the team, they can join the team. If after that they have problem, or they can ask, hey, how can I merge this, or how I can make multiple requests to have more commits. I can help them afterwards. The important thing here is willing to work on the project. That's the most important thing. Knowledge can be taught.
Yeah, and just to add on that, as another aspect, sometimes I'll keep in mind issues that are easier to do, and sometimes I'll go spam around Slack, or I think I've done IRC before as well, but try to get people to contribute if they're interested in doing open source. Like if they've never contributed before, sometimes I'll walk through the process of how to follow our commit commit message guidelines and all that, and get everything good and tidy for pull request.
Yeah, the former host of Angular Air, who I can't remember his name right now.
Can't see that.
Kent.
Who's that? No. He's big into that first timers only tag on issues in GitHub, and this is actually a good segue into sorry, I accidentally hit the mute button. Maintainer hacks to manage your app. So yeah, sure. I do think that's a good idea. First timers tag, that encourages people to join. One other, and I'd be interested in hearing some of the other hacks you guys have seen or done yourself. But one thing I wanted to bring up that I saw the other day, which to get some of your thoughts on, is I forgot who did this, but someone thought it was a good idea to just turn off GitHub issues altogether and only allow for PRs, with the thinking that okay, he wants to encourage people that if you want to change something, you should, like, okay, something's broken, you should submit a test that's broken, or like a PR with a test that's broken, or whatever, and kind of and I understand the thinking, but there's this whole big discussion online and people upset, actually, that thinking that was detrimental and not sort of his intended thing. What are your guys' thoughts? Dimitri, what do you think about this?
Yeah, it was kind of fun discussion about disabling issues. From my experience, like maybe 1 or 2% at the topmost of usage of users of your framework will contribute. So disabling issues will just they will find a way to say their no to the Twitter or some kind of Slack channel just to know about some kind of issues. They will find a way to report it. So I suppose guys can tell us a lot about direct emails they get with issues, even if issues enabled on GitHub. So yeah, it was a fun talk. But from other side, it was kind of nice decision from like time management. He saved his time on answering the same issues once again and again, and he can contribute more, not to waste his time on reading the issues, and most probably he knew about those issues. But from other side, I'm more like a fan of healthy open source by Node.js, so it will not help to really get more contributors to your library, because if you disable issues, you disable an option to just go through and trying to find some kind of, maybe this issue already was solved, and you just need to find out some kind of solution in issues, and you don't provide this way. I suppose all guys can get used to go to the issues and search for something, and you just disable it. Not cool.
Different, just shutting it off cold. Like, it's one thing encouraging people to submit more PRs, but just sort of shutting off other channels probably isn't the best thing. Although I'm sure when that came out to Jesus, you were at least part of you were like, well, maybe. Did you guys see that article? What did you guys think?
I have no clue about it.
I have an opinion on the topic. You can't shut down issues because people need to tell you about issues. Some issues can be solved with pull requests because they perhaps don't have the time, the knowledge, anything else. But I use some projects, big projects in the past. We have issues and we have the way to say, hey, you have this wrong. So if I can tell you that this is wrong, that's not helpful because that will be wrong for me and for everyone else, but no one can report it. You have to find it yourself. That's the wrong idea.
I think I mostly agree with that. I think that there's a certain level of familiarity that you kind of need to have in a project in order to create a meaningful pull request. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes an issue also isn't just saying, hey, there's this bug. An issue is open because somebody wants to have a discussion about maybe a different way that your project could approach things, maybe some new features, and to say like, hey, is this within the vision that you guys currently have or not? So I think that straight up shutting off issues, at least for a project like UI Router, I don't think it would be a reasonable thing for us to do. It would be nice to, like you said, have more time to spend actually coding instead of triaging issues, and it does take up a lot of our time, definitely. But I don't think that turning them off would be the answer for me.
Yeah. I mean,
also,
go ahead, Wes.
I just want to add. Sometimes you really need lengthy discussions. You need feedback. Like, for example, somebody finds something that clearly looks like an issue, but they don't necessarily know where the real fix needs to be in, for example. They need maybe sometimes some input decision from the maintainers as far as what to do, because there's a lot of complexity involved. What is the intention? What side effects one choice versus another might have. Sometimes it's very involved, and also you also want these discussions sort of in the open so that there's a record of it, so that anybody else looking can see what the intentions are of the maintainers, and see where maybe a better approach might be able to be found to fix it. Sometimes it also ends up being something where you can figure out a workaround, for example. So having these discussions out in the open, and something like Twitter is not a good venue for that. Twitter limits the number of characters, and people tend to tweet when they're more angry at something also. Have more of a tendency to do that. Email is a very closed medium, unless you like copy and paste whole emails. Some people might not appreciate that though. So I feel like GitHub Issues is the natural right place to at least have the discussions. Maybe something needs to be done to make it more palatable for everybody involved. I don't know. But I feel like any sort of attempt to motivate people to contribute more maybe should start with something else instead of just like I feel like it's more of a knee-jerk reaction maybe to do something like that or something very drastic.
Wes, I think I agree with you on that. And if it's just to get people to contribute to your project, I just don't feel like that's the right way to do it, and I don't feel like that's going to get you the highest quality of contributions either. I think you might get pull requests that are very narrowly scoped, that can't take into account the other users, that sort of thing, and the side effects and all that other stuff that you mentioned. I agree.
Before moving on to the contributors, one last thing is, what else did we miss that, do you guys have any special tricks or anything else as maintainers that you guys think would be valuable for other people running open source projects to know about?
Yes. One, how to sleep less. That's the only trick.
Wait, sleep less?
Yes. But you can do more.
Oh, that's true. Although, actually, I don't necessarily follow this, but they say that if you sleep more, you're more productive and get more done. Although I've read studies and I sort of, like, I hear the words, and it goes into my brain. It's one of those things that I've never actually been able to do. Like, I usually go on like 4 or 5 hours of sleep, so it's... yeah, that can be a problem in itself. But yeah, no, I agree. More hours in the day is a lot of times the ultimate solution. So, okay, let's move on to the contributor side of things. And I guess before we get into like the protocols for contributing, and I really want to hear some of your guys' like ideas for some best practices there. Let's talk about motivation, where not everybody, even though some people may right from the start say, I want to contribute to this project, other people aren't necessarily sure why they would in the first place. So what do people get out of being a contributor?
That's a difficult question because that's depend on the person. You can think, okay, I am a new developer and I want to learn more about Angular, so I want to participate on an Angular project. Other person can say, okay, I like to write documentation, so this project doesn't have much, so I can put my effort. Other people can do it because, okay, I want to be awesome and I want to be famous, so I work for a project. I mean, each people have their own motivation, they have to find it, and if they do, just work on one, but you can't force any people to have any motivation. You can say, hey, join me and you will get glory, because that's not true. They have one. If they have it and they want to work on a project, welcome.
Oh, you mean it's not glorious to fix documentation typos?
No, that for me is, but the other thing, no.
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree with a lot you're saying. Actually, one thing that I tell people starting out, even though this is like a hard thing for them to do sometimes, is that nobody's stopping you from being a contributor. Like that's the great thing about open source, is that when you're starting off to be a software developer, like right out of college or just learning on your own, there are some barriers there. It's tough to get your first job. As great as the need there is for developers, for junior developers, it's actually still kind of tough to like break into it sometimes. And the great thing about open source is that you don't have to ask people's permission. So as long as you kind of dedicate yourself and dedicate the time, like I think it's something that is a great way to get a foothold, even if you don't have even your first job doing software development. Learn some of the basics, as part of the open source, and then you can kind of build off of that. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
Maybe not this time it will be me, because I have one dude in my company who actually was a manager by sales in company with like some kind of techniques. And what he started to do is to read about testing. He was afraid to program, even not to contribute. He was even just afraid to write some kind of code. So he started to help to open source by testing their new releases, and then he was like producing a lot of issues, but he was kind of good in it because he was reading the books, like really book nerd. And after that, guys invited him to kind of, there are different kind of contributions. You could write code, you can help with documentation, you can create issues and test, and what is for me the most important stuff, the guys who help answer the questions, because there are a lot of same questions all the time, that I cannot do this stuff, and it's like 50 times again you will see this question again from different kind of interpolations. And there are some kind of guys who afraid to write a code, but they could be really helpful answering those kind of questions, because they save a lot of time to those who write code. After that, we have some kind of chat, and I have invited him to my company. No matter, I knew he was like not even a junior, more like intern, but I have seen his intentions, not even what he was done or what he learned, but his intentions was clear and he was willing to learn. So, and after several years after that, he's pretty good developer right now. Still afraid to code, but anyway, he's pretty good.
Oh man, I gotta say, it is the best feeling when somebody you don't know, who never saw, answers a question on either whether it's the GitHub issues or Gitter or Slack or whatever. That is the best, definitely. Okay. One thing I want to get into here is, Chris, maybe if you're open to this, I'd be interested in hearing what your guidelines are for people contributing in terms of like, okay, I want to contribute something to UI Router. What do I do in order to do that? And then maybe like off of what the protocols you bring up, and maybe we'll talk about some variations that we've seen in other projects and along those lines.
Yeah, maybe I'll start by just explaining how I got involved with UI Router project as a maintainer. When I first started coding on UI Router, I had an itch that I needed scratched, and UI Router project didn't have the mental model that I needed to accomplish something in my app. So I started hacking on it, and I submitted a PR a few years back. And it was a fairly, it changed a lot of the way that UI Router would have worked, but it was something that I needed for my purposes, and so I coded it. It wasn't merged because it didn't fit with the project's vision, and so I created it as a plugin, as a side project, and I started developing it for other people as well, because I found an itch that I knew I needed scratched, and I figured that other people might have the same thing. So I built this side project, UI Router Extras, and eventually the core team kind of saw that and said, hey, are you interested in getting involved? And so I said, okay, I'll get involved. So that's kind of how I got involved as the maintainer. I started out with something that I felt like I needed. I proposed it to the UI Router project, and we discussed it at length, there's
At that time, Nate was the head of the project. Is that right?
Yeah, Nate's still the head of the project. He's just not as active as he used to be.
Okay.
So yeah, he's still on part of the team. But I think that's going to be a pretty common pattern for people. They see this thing that they really enjoy using. They want to improve it, and so they submit a PR. And if you're active within the issues, if you're active commenting and helping other people, the maintainers quite often will notice that. And that can be, I mean, like you said, you don't have to ask permission to get involved in a project. It can be as simple as answering somebody's question, just like you said. And that's really, really helpful for maintainers to have not just other people working through those issues and watching them and that sort of thing, but also to hear other voices that have maybe a different perspective on things. That's really, really helpful to us just to hear the conversation. In the UI router project, we don't really have any super strict guidelines on how to contribute to the project. The only one that we really have is that we have a specific commit message that we require, because that's how we build our changelog. And we also require that if you're fixing a bug, that you have to write a failing test case for that bug. And that's about it. A lot of times we will iterate with a PR. If there's a PR that's fixing a bug, we'll iterate with the person who initiated that PR, and we'll say, this thing maybe could be done better in this other way. And then they'll update their PR. Or if it's something that we think we can just fix, we'll take what they have and fix it for them. But other than that, we really don't have super strict guidelines.
Okay, that's good to know. And I do like it being somewhat loose, like it gives you flexibility to kind of adjust it. I do know some people have like much more strict, like if you contribute to the Angular core, for example, they want you to create your own branch, and when the commit message has to be formatted in a very specific way, they have like the actual different types of like your categories and what the format should be, and then you submit your PR based off of that. I'm probably missing a couple other things, but they will like kind of push things back to you if you don't kind of have it set up in that way, because they have like a lot of their automation built off of having things in that same format. So, Wes, what about you? Does your process differ from Chris's at all?
I mean, it's largely the same, although sometimes in practice I actually will help get them over the last hump by doing some Git wizardry and squashing some of the commits, rebasing for them. If it's safe. I mean, I have to be very careful, make sure all the tests pass and all that. But yeah, we generally want tests for new features or bug fixes if possible. But what is it? UI Bootstrap at least interfaces more with the actual like DOM nodes. So when it comes to UI stuff, sometimes it's really hard to test stuff, and so we actually don't have a setup that's very conducive for certain types of testing when it comes to the UI, so we can't do some of it, unfortunately. But by and large, we pretty much follow the same stuff. But I'll also help out amending the commit messages and all that, just so it doesn't get hold up, because I know there's a lot of contributors or potential contributors who get a little frustrated sometimes when you have when a pull request gets bogged down by more, I guess, minute processes like these.
Yeah, that is one thing I didn't appreciate until I started working on a lot of the Angular stuff in Angular Universal, is that sort of clean Git history. With my projects at work, there's only a couple of developers, and so we to be honest, largely don't care about that. We just merge over each other and commit anything. I mean, whatever. It all kind of eventually gets all together. But it is kind of interesting when you are kind of focused on trying to make sure that everything when you submit a PR and you merge it back, that it gets attributed to the right user and all of that. So yeah, okay, that's interesting. And Jesus, what about you? Do you have any differences with the way that you prefer the process to work?
No, I pretty much agree with Wes. We have our own rules, which are the Angular rules about commits, titles, and stuff, but that's mostly for the changelog, because the changelog will read every commit message to generate itself. But mostly what Wes say, we try people to do it right, like, hey, please change the title, please squash your commits, but at the end, if they don't know how to do it, we do it, because you can make someone say, hey, I won't accept your PR until you do everything right. If he can't, I do it.
Yeah, I mean, this gets back to, again, that sort of balance between, you do want to like teach people and kind of push them to do things the right way, but you don't want to block people from contributing. So yeah, I've seen kind of both sides of that, where probably most of the time you have to gauge where the person's coming from, like on an individual basis. Like, is this the person that you can, like, is interested in learning and you can push to kind of redo their PR to kind of set it up the right way, and then from then on they're good, or are they just going to kind of abandon things? In which case, like you're saying, Jesus, you just kind of do it yourself and move forward.
I think we all kind of are saying the same thing, that if there's a contribution that's waiting, a PR that's pending, and it looks like it's quality code, but they're having problems with the process, well, that's not a big deal. I think we all are kind of agreeing that we'll just do whatever it takes to get that PR merged. If there's some bigger issues with the PR, like perhaps you might not know that it causes some other use case to fail, then I might send it back and say, hey, try again, or I might just try to massage it and actually change the code so that it does account for all the other use cases that the user didn't know about those things. It's not their fault. So yeah.
So Dimitri, last question on the contributor side before we move to the company side of things. What are your thoughts on a code of conduct? That it's typically, well, actually, there's a lot of projects that don't define this at all. Like that, it's most of the time people are good-natured and there's no issues or whatever. But I have seen things where it can get hairy. So there are some projects that just specifically define, just in terms of what is acceptable and what is not for behavior, both in issues and PRs and whatever. What are your thoughts on code of conducts?
I would say that you're pretty lucky to not have seen bad input, even through pull request. I did not have seen it to my repositories, but I have seen a lot of tweets from guys like Todd or anyone else who has a lot of stuff, what has it produced, and guys could be really annoying with saying not really nice words inside of his contribution to the README about the after this package, and this became kind of a problem. And because GitHub lately even provided an option to organization maintainers to block users from accessing this organization, from issues, from cloning, from creating pull requests. So like the size of the problem kind of it's a bit bigger than we can see it, because if it would not so, GitHub wouldn't provide this functionality so fast, really. And code of conduct is pretty good, because if guys will see that you're not only requiring features but providing them, like if you want to work with us, if you want to work with other part of community, please be nice. So don't hesitate to be a nice person, at least at GitHub. So this is it.
Do any of you other guys explicitly have code of conducts, or is it more kind of implicit, the be nice thing?
UI Router project does not have a code of conduct. I think if we did have a code of conduct, it would literally be nice.
Yeah, that's probably a good one. It's just, I don't think it, to be honest, happens that often. Where, generally speaking, if you're in open source and especially if you're contributing, you sort of already have the mindset of giving and kind of community and that type of thing. But yeah, I have seen, especially when there is like an issue that it can be contentious, like people are kind of debating over and they kind of step on each other's toes. That's probably the most where I've seen it is if it's like an issue that's like not that people are debating and then it kind of gets heated somewhat. But generally speaking, people are pretty good about stuff. All right, let's jump to the company side of things. And for this, Jesus, what is your thoughts on a company's the way they should be thinking about open source? Because I think different companies think about open source in different ways. Some of them see it as like a security risk, right? And they try to avoid it, like some of the bigger banks and that type of thing. Some people embrace it, like Netflix, or where they actually have people kind of contribute. They actively want their developers to contribute time, and a lot of people are in between. What are your thoughts on this?
So once I heard someone saying, as soon as you pull a dependency in your project, that dependency is now part of your project. Your project needs it to live, because if that project does wrong, your project will suffer it. We all know what happened with LeftPad. It disappeared one day, half the internet broke. So if a dependency is doing good, you are doing good too. So you can't expect the library to work by itself and think, okay, they will fix all the issues for us. You as a company needs to collaborate. You can go to the issue tracker of a dependency you use and say, hey, we are a big company on a big project and we need this feature for yesterday because we need it. Okay, you can need it, but our dependency is inside your project. You need our code to work. So imagine it like a different feature of your program. You can have one guy, two guys come to the library and talk with us. Hey, we need that. Do you think that's possible? Yes. Okay, we are going to create a pull request and send it to you. Or if you can have any manpower to do it, you can say, okay, we can pay you this kind of money to do it. Do you agree? Yes. So we do it. But what you can't do is think that libraries are maintained by goblins or something that magically, boom, new feature, thank you. No, that's part of your code. If we do wrong...
Was that goblins?
Yes. Like magic.
That's awesome.
I mean, so if your library or your project depend on a library, that's part of you. If we do wrong, your project will do wrong. If we have a major issue, your application will have that major issue. So please, you can spend money or you can spend some manpower, but you can't simply say, hey, you have to be thankful to us because we are using your product. No, you need to work with us. That is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I do think with what you're saying, depending on the company, there are things that the people who are sort of on the other side would argue against. So like, and there's different aspects of this. So like, let's take the far extreme of a financial institution like Goldman Sachs or Wells Fargo or whatever. So, and both those companies do use Angular, right? But I know that internally there's issues because they have to, a lot of times the developers have to fight the company in order to just be able to use it in the first place. Contributing, forget about it. Like they are like banned like from contributing at all. And a lot of the times the reason that when I talk to them about this, they feel it's a mix of, and this may be just excuses or whatever, but part of it is like a security thing. They feel like if they are contributing their code externally, that it presents some sort of security risk. and exposes them, or in some way exposes them. So like they're just like in their minds they're just trying to like be safe. I think the other aspect of it is just them, and this goes beyond I guess financial institutions, but like them thinking that their developers are going to be like wasting time. Like in other words, that they should be contributing their time to just their internal projects. And I'm not saying those are right. Like this is what I hear from people. So what do you guys say to those two things?
Let me say this quick. If I can spend my free time on making a feature, you can do that as well, because that's interesting for you and also interesting for me, so you can make a little time for it. Or we can do it together, I don't mind, but you need to put something.
Also, it can help companies themselves because let's say a feature is not in a particular library and they have to hack around it in order to actually implement that feature. But if it makes sense for it to be in the library, then it would be in the company's best interest to actually contribute it back upstream because, first of all, then I mean, everybody else gets the benefit, including other teams that you have, but then it also potentially reduces the complexity, improves performance. There's a lot of reasons why it would be good to have companies contributing features back to the libraries.
I think a lot of companies look at it from an ROI perspective, and if they don't see that there's going to be some sort of return, they're not going to authorize their employees to spend company time fixing these sort of issues. I know I've seen that in places that I worked, for sure. And it's kind of as an open source maintainer, it's kind of a hard pill to swallow that your product is not being supported by the people that are using it. But at the same time, I don't blame companies for not actually spending money on maintaining open source software. The companies that do, I think that's fantastic, and I really like that.
Well, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh, go ahead. Respond.
Well, I was just going to say, so on the other end of it, like the companies that do, like you're saying, if a company is on the other side and wants to contribute and they're all for it, what do you guys think is the ultimate setup? Like, should a company have dedicated resources? Like, so there's different variations of this that I've seen. Should a company have like, okay, these two guys are just our open source, like contributors, like they're mostly focused on this particular project, or should it just be sort of everybody kind of just a part of what they do? What do you guys think? What do you think, Chris?
I would love to know what works. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think from my perspective, I would prefer that the people that are contributing to the open source project are interested in that project, that they're actual users of it, that they're interested in the product itself, not just in something that they do on a Friday because their employer said that they had to. I'd rather have more buy-in from the individual. So I guess I'd like to say that maybe it would work if the employer gave permission for an employee to work on a project that they're already invested in.
I think that it depends on the project. If you're using a big project like UI Router or UI Bootstrap, perhaps you can have the manpower because that needs a lot of time, research, and something. If you are a big company, you can sponsor it. I say, hey, I pay you X and you take care of issues. But in the case of a little library that you use for notification or date picker, something small that you can spend the time of it. I get issues like, hey, sorry, I get this issue that I cannot make a free production because it depends on big things. And in my company, we're getting that issue. Then on those small projects, you can have the manpower to say, hey, let me try to reproduce it on my project, make some fixes on your library, and if I fix it, I make a pull request. So depending on the size of the project, you can say, okay, we pay money and you make it works, or I can fix those issues for you.
So Wes, how about if you were starting a new company today, a product-based company, let's say, and not financial, nothing like too secretive or whatever, where you have to kind of keep everything closed source. What would be the criteria that you would have for which of your own internal code you would open source versus not? Like, how would you determine that in an ideal case?
I mean, ideally, I would want pretty much all the code to be open sourceable, except maybe something dealing with infrastructure and, of course, private keys and such. I mean, because then it can easily be vetted. Okay, if somebody finds something wrong, it's very clear, and then you can fix it, and the record of that fix is up there. It could also give a guarantee also to any company using the product that, hey, this is it's not secured by obscurity. It's actually like it's following practices vetted by everybody else.
Yeah, and there's definitely some companies that I've seen out there that follow that. But I have also seen where I'm not sure if this is just a marketing or recruiting thing rather for them, but they sort of quote unquote open source their software, meaning that it's on GitHub maybe, but they don't really allow for external contributors, and it's not really something that other people would use. It's just more as like, okay, we're sort of putting the open source term on it just to say that it's sort of out there, but not really. So because I do think that it is to truly open source the stuff that you have, it requires a serious effort and sort of top-down dedication to doing that as an organization, right?
Yeah, I'd say I agree with that.
Okay. We're going to be at the top of our time. I just noticed it's been flying by here today. So we do have one question on Twitter for you guys. And Dimitri, how about you can field this one? It sounds like this guy, Attaché, wants to get started with open source, and what are some good projects to get started with, some good JavaScript-based open source projects to get started with if he wants to start contributing to open source?
Oh, I would rather say that where you should not start, don't try to start your contribution with ESLint, because Zakas is a really nice writer, but it's really hard to convince him to get something. But to be honest, you can search for it, and there are label help wanted. And you can use a global search, then filter by JavaScript, and you will get huge list of things that are required. Get anyone. But you will not be really performant in solving those issues if you are not interested in their solving. So, try to find the tool you use, choose it, go to the repository, find any issue, help wanted or whatever, and just help with contribution, docs, answering issues, whatever.
I think it's a good suggestion. Any other guys have suggestions for repositories that people should take a look at, JavaScript-based libraries?
The library that he likes. If he likes Bootstrap, he can do Bootstrap things. He likes routing things. You can't, the suggestion is something you like, because if you don't like the project, you are going to get bored, and that's not the point. You can get, okay, I like this project. Perhaps you know about the project. You can go to issues and fix all the problems they have, questions, perhaps fix the documentation, and from there, everything you want.
Sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I'll go. I'm just going to echo what Dimitri and Jesus said, that, get involved with something that you're interested in, something that you I wouldn't recommend jumping in on a project that you've never heard of before. Jump in on something that you have an actual interest in using, that you've used in the past.
So my recommendation actually is a little on the different side. I guess it would depend on how much patience you have also, because my first contribution was actually to Angular 1. And so, I felt like I learned a lot when I just was starting out development. It really depends. I would recommend a major project if possible. take a look at the issues, see if you can figure something out, and then just try fixing it or whatever. And if you fail, you fail. That's okay.
Let's jump
it's
in.
part of the learning process.
Well, yeah, that brings up one thing that we talked about the last show you guys were on, which is like, is through failure is a good thing. Scott Moss actually talked about this in his NGConf talk, that you learn by failure, right? That you should embrace that and not be afraid of doing something bad, because once you do, then you're, okay, that's not right. Now I know the right thing to do, and you kind of go from there. I mean, if you kept making the same mistake, that's like a different that's a different problem that you can deal with. But definitely just a one-time mistake and then learn from it and move on. That's a good thing. So, all right, let's move on to picks. I think it's been a great show talking to you guys. I could talk to you guys all day about this, but we'll maybe have to meet again later this year for another round. So, Chris, why don't we start with you on the picks?
Sure, I have 2 picks. This is related to JavaScript fatigue. There's a new framework out I'd like you all to check out. It's called vanilla-js.com. It's pretty cool. I have a second pick. My second pick is at NGConf we got Rubik's Cubes as part of our swag, and I'm relearning how to solve Rubik's Cubes. And there's a really cool tutorial that you can look up on YouTube. It's Rito's Hunting Story, R-I-D-O, Rito's Hunting Story for F2L. Look that up if you're interested in Rubik's.
Cool. Make sure you paste the links in the chat, and I'll make sure those are in the notes.
Will do.
Dimitri.
As for me, I had 2 picks, but one of them I already said is healthy open source, just in this case, because I have to read it again and I fall in love with it again. And it's not a thing and not a post. It's people who helped me a lot this week. I wasn't even expected so much of help, really. But those guys are really awesome. So if you see me, thank you so much.
Nice. Cool. Jesus.
So I just have one pick, but it's an awesome one. I recommend another podcast called Sustaining Open Source Software by Mike, the guy from Sidekick, which explains how not to get burned on open source and how to make it more, how to get some money, how to do better. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I love that podcast too. I've listened to it a number of times before, so I would second +1 that vote. Wes.
What type of picks are these supposed to be? Because I actually am a bit blank right now.
You can pick anything. You can pick what you had for lunch today. What did you have for lunch today, Wes?
Well, I'm smelling lunch right now, but what is it? So there was an interesting article I read in the past couple of days. There was a maintainer that, a guy who's contributed a lot to the Rails community. He posted an article called "My Time with Rails is Up," and I found that a very interesting read about something that it's not like JavaScript itself. It's something that you sort of see in a lot of like communities revolving around frameworks, languages, and such. And I guess it gives an interesting perspective as far as what's happening in another development ecosystem.
Yeah, I love those types of talks. I think that my experience in seeing, like, I'm leaving X for Y or whatever, is that they're a little skewed. You have to like read them with a grain of salt because obviously that person went through like a bad experience. But they're usually pretty interesting. Yeah, so I'll definitely read that article. For me, oh, sorry, Wes, what were you going to say about?
Oh, well, this guy actually like has contributed a bunch to the ecosystem and has used Rails for quite a while. So he has probably a lot of perspective on something like that.
Yep, definitely. So for me, 2 picks. I'll post, and actually all you guys should post links to your repos that I'll make sure are in there so that people can contribute. For me, it's Angular Universal, UI Router, NG Bootstrap, UI Bootstrap. We'll make sure that those are in the notes. But the other one I was going to have here is Taro posted a really good article yesterday, I believe it was, talking about the things that excite me about Angular 2. And for people that have been heavily involved in Angular 2, I don't think that he necessarily brings up anything new per se, but I like the way he kind of frames the thinking behind the things that are important, and then how you should be evaluating Angular 2 or any other framework for that matter. So I highly recommend it. If people ask you or you wonder yourself, why Angular 2, how does it compare to something else? This is a good place to start, I think. I'll include that in the show notes. All right, guys. Next week we're going to have Jim Cummings on to talk about GraphQL. So it's going to be a fun one. And then after that, I'm in the middle of formulating the next season of shows. So I'll be posting those in the next week or so. So stay tuned. Thanks a lot, everyone, and have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.